Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's conversation. Today, we are going to be talking about women at workplace. Let me introduce myself before we get on the way. I am Rudmai. I work as a senior consultant psychologist at Amaha. I have more than 6 years of experience in the field of mental health, and I have worked with clients who struggle with depression, anxiety. Largely, that's the large chunk of the population, and it's very exciting for me to talk about the topic today. I am personally very passionate about women's mental health and women's safety issues. Right. I'm going to share my screen. Do give me a heads up if you're able to see. I hope this is visible to everyone. If someone can just let me know in the chat box, that would be awesome. Cool. A couple of ground rules. If there are any questions, any clarifications, anyone wants to share any experiences or comment on anything that I'm speaking, please maybe raise your hand or put it in the chat box, and we shall have it in a more conversational manner. Any questions I will be addressing at the end. And yeah, if there are any problems with audio, video, do let me know. Again, do put it in the chat box and I'll try to resolve it. All right, let's get started. So today we want to be talking about why we are having this discussion, right? Like that should be the first point of our conversation today. What are some of the barriers that exist for women, particularly at workplace, that prevent them from doing best of their work or rising to the best of their capabilities? And of course, what are some actionable solutions, right? What is it that we can do on ground to sort of mitigate these factors? Yeah, someone is raising their hand. If it's a question or something, please put it in the chat box. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to start with this basic question, right? What concerns do you see women facing in modern workplaces? What are some of the things that you have observed? Okay. And feel free to share your opinions, your answers in the chat box so that everyone has visibility as well. I to start with, I used to work in a hospital setting, right? This was almost 3-4 years back, and I think one of the biggest challenges was finding spaces or finding corners in that hospital where I could be on my own, because when you work in a hospital, it's a lot more sometimes reactive work as well. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of chaos around, and you do need a moment just to yourself. And finding that in a hospital, trust me, is a huge challenge. So for me, that was a challenge since I worked in a hospital setting. The staff and male gathering plays a group code and get united with them. Okay, if I'm understanding it right, what this person is trying to say that um, having having a larger male population sometimes can act as a barrier or something, sometimes can prevent women from accessing workplace or spaces in a workplace. I hope I'm getting that right. If not, please feel free to correct me, elaborate on what you have mentioned. All right. Anyone else has seen any kind of concerns or any kind of challenges that women face in the workplaces that we have today? Glass ceiling effects, yes, absolutely. I think that's a very poignant comment and topic also, and we'll talk about it as we move forward. That's very true. Anyone else? Anyone has any other reflections on this? In your own experience, have you come across any challenging situations? I remember and cornering one person because they're not from the same gender as you are. Right. So basically, women can feel isolated and they can feel attacked because they are minority, right? I remember my mother. She was one of the very few women in her classrooms when she was in college, and she took up a branch of engineering that is largely male dominated, right? Mechanical engineering. And she has stories full of these challenges that she would face as a woman, that the professors would not interact with her, the male students would not interact with her, help her in operating the machinery, in helping her with just the logistics of it, because she was a woman and they were, quote unquote, worried of how it might be perceived, and also with the bias that what a woman is doing in this workplace. So yeah, these are things that women have faced at workplace, right? So when we talk about challenges that women face, right, it's also very important to look at what data says, because just anecdotes and examples and personal stories don't really help us understand the gravity and the context of the issue that we are facing, right? This is as latest report as we can get, right? 2022. The female labor force participation in India is 25%, right? And that's like literally half of what we would expect. Women who have access to maternity benefits is 27%. Right? 30% of women in India face gender-based violence. 72% of female employees have reported high levels of stress. 72%. That is such a huge number of women employees. Most of the employees report work-life balance imbalance and struggles with maintaining work-life balance. 18% of women report it, right? 20% of women have said that they always feel low at workplace. What it also does uh, is that it impacts our policies, it impacts how we look at this problem, and it impacts our solutions, right? Someone is saying something in the chat box. This is the latest data that we have according to our research. If anyone has any more latest statistics from 2023, 2024, please feel free to share that. Right. Right. Again, putting down some numbers here, right? Men end up holding 60% of manager level positions or higher in an organization. What it does, it sort of prevents the female workforce or women at workplace to maybe also approach the management level with the kind of concerns that they have, right? 37% of working women say that they get fewer opportunities than men. As you go up the ladder, the number of women up the ladder start decreasing substantially, right? We only have 13% women in senior roles in 2023, and among CXOs, it's 10%, which is really jarring, especially in the 21st century. The idea of putting these numbers here is to also put how much of serious this concern is, this problem is, and also what is happening, right? What is causing these numbers? Yes, right? So what are some of the core concerns that women face at workplace? The topmost, believe it or not, is sexual harassment. Most of the people have stories around sexual harassment at work that ranges from maybe microaggressions, and I'll speak about what microaggressions are, to sexual violence and molestation, right? There is gender discrimination, which is very rampant, right from very innocuous statements that are made to opportunities not being given to women or other minorities. Gender discrimination still comes up a lot, even in the most woke organizations have. Women are denied promotions on basis of a lot of factors that are beyond their control and factors that don't really come into place when it comes to men and them being promoted. The gender wage disparity is very obvious. It's a common knowledge. And I'll also talk about gender pay gap and how that impacts the opportunities that women get. Maternity leaves are denied, they're unavailable, or they're very limited. Right? That also impacts work-life balance, that impacts the kind of decisions that women end up making. unsafe work environments, right? Not having safety and security, basic safety and security, like having proper toilets, having changing rooms, having baby care rooms, having proper commute if there are night shifts involved, right? All of these factors do impact the decision making that women have when it comes to whether I want to take this job, whether I want this promotion, as well as it also plays a huge role for what it does to the family dynamics, right? There's a lot of occupational segregation, right? People do work in groups, they have cliques, they have subgroups, and that has a disadvantage for women largely. When working conditions are inflexible, when personal circumstances are not being considered, right? It is going to increase the limitations a person has for them to move around, for them to adjust to the situation. So inflexible working conditions can make it very hard for women to show up at work, forget about thriving and growing at a workplace. But all of these make survival at workplace difficult, right? And all of these things don't have to always happen on a macro level, right? They don't have to be these big things that happen and then you talk about. All of these can also happen at a more micro level, what we call microaggressions, at a very subtle level, where maybe we are not aware of our own biases, maybe where we are not aware of our own prejudices, right? And it still has an impact, it still has an outcome where a gender is at a disadvantage. So what causes, what do we attribute these concerns to, right? What is happening that is leading to all of these core problems, right? Anyone has any guess? Anyone has any opinion on this? Okay. Let's look at maybe systemic issues to begin with, right? Let's look at the bigger issues and then come to more personal causes, right? So systemic causes are basically our social and political fabric of our society that dictates how we behave, that dictates what our belief systems are, that dictates our expectations from our own selves and from others. Societal structure. Yeah, that's very correct, right? So what I was trying to ask is, right, we've looked at the core problems. What we're trying to understand is what is causing these core problems, right? Why is it that women face XYZ things at workplace? And one of the reasons, one of the bigger conversations that we need to have is around systemic causes, right? So when we look at the larger picture here, right, think about you as a working woman or your mother as a working woman, and then also look at the men in the family, look at the men around you, right? The expectation today is that the women will also work and earn money and share the financial burden in the household and while holding the other responsibilities, right? While holding the responsibility of running a household, while child rearing, while looking after in-laws, while looking after her own parents, right? We call it that, after women go back home, they start their second job, right? Whereas men only have to think about uh, maybe looking at the financial aspect of it, right? They're not expected to invest or to do the same amount of work or to share the same amount of labor that women are expected to in terms of how to run a household, right? What also it does, it creates cognitive mental load for women, right? A very simple scenario, right? If your mother, and I'm going to talk about mother because I see this with my mom a lot, right? More than I see it with myself. When my mom has to put clothes for laundry, she will not just empty the laundry basket, right? She will go around the house picking up clothes, picking up towels, napkins, anything that she sees that has to be put for laundry. Whereas if my dad has to do laundry, he will just pick up the laundry basket, empty it in the machine, and put it on, right? So that's the difference of household labor, right? And this is the cognitive mental load that we are talking about, that women have to actively think and actively be on their toes in terms of managing a house, something that men are not taught to do. Right? There is also intersectionality in discrimination. The more labels you have, the more you are likely to be at a disadvantage, right? Women who come from marginal uh, societies, women who come from scheduled castes, women who come from lower socioeconomic class are more likely to face gender-based discrimination, sexual violence at their workplace than women from, okay, just want to look at the comment. What gives a deeper understanding of women's health in workplace is that workplace shouldn't be counted in isolation. Women face society and cultural challenges everywhere. That's very true. That's very true. Workplace is almost an extension of society, right? Our families are family systems are an extension of society. So what happens outside, what happens to us as a society will have an impact of what happens at workplace, what happens in our own families, in our own societies, right? Women are also um, thought of as more suitable, or they, that they should be doing more jobs that are what we call HEED, right? Healthcare, early education, and domestic jobs, while men are more thought of to be in STEM related fields. Just as an exercise, when you think about these professions, right? What's the gender you associate it with? What do you associate firefighters with? What gender do you associate maybe hairdressers with? What's the gender you associate teachers with? What's the gender you associate doctors with? Yeah, that's right. Family support and social norms are closely related to workplace wellness. So when you look at all these professions here and professions outside, right? We do have this inherent bias, right? Even when I think about astronaut, I will not think of a female astronaut, right? The first thought is of a male astronaut because that's the image that we have grown up with, right? When I think of a teacher, I do think of a female teacher, especially a kindergarten teacher, right? Because that's the bias that I have grown up with. That's the conditioning that has happened because of the society I live in, because of my upbringing, because of the environment. And it takes a lot of effort and intention to break out of this bias. So this makes us come to we need to understand stereotypes, right? And I'm going to talk just about men and women here. I know there are a lot of different genders, but largely talking about men and women, right? Stereotypically, men are ascribed what we call agentic characteristics, which means we expect men to be aggressive, to be straightforward, to be go-getters, to sort of speak their mind, to be out there, to be almost aggressive in a way, right? In how they come across, especially as we move up the leadership ladder, right? Whereas women are stereotypically regarded as thought of as having more communal characteristics. Communal characteristics, as in people who will bind the society together, who will keep people together. So they're thought of more as nurturing, right? More thought of as caring, affectionate, taking care of other people. They're more in role of caregivers, right? So stereotypically, we have these ideas of how men and women should be, right? For example, women's attire is perceived as less dominant, right? Whereas if the same woman wears pants, trousers, and shirts, then it's perceived as more unlikable as well, right? So it's a lot of expectations from how women should behave at workplace and women should behave as a whole that adds to these challenges. Stereotypes, what it does, it creates a distance between me and you because I'm trying to fit you in a box, right? Whereas you may or may not fit into that box. And that box is a very limited definition or a limited reflection of who you are as a person. But I'm automatically creating a hierarchy. I'm automatically creating a power dynamic. Moving on to kind of gender biases that women face, right? Proving it again. a lot of, and this is what research says, right? That women think and they face this situation on a more regular basis where they have to keep proving themselves again and again and again because people don't believe that they're cut out for it, right? Because there is an inherent understanding that she might not be able to get it. She might not be able to understand it. She might not be able to deliver on it, right? So this thing of having to prove again and again, every time you move a position, every time you change teams, every time you change jobs, every time you change fields, right? You have to prove yourself more in as compared to a man in a similar situation. The tightrope, I think this is very interesting because um, women are should when they behave in a more masculine manner because they need to also showcase that they can also be aggressive, they can also be go-getters, they can also be independent, they can also be assertive, right, to get the job done, whereas the expectation is that they should be feminine, right, that they should come across as feminine. So while I am maybe um, commanding a room, right, like a man would, it's also expected that I do it with gentleness, I do it with kindness, right, because I'm a woman. So women have to walk on this tightrope where they're trying to balance the masculine traits and the feminine traits, right? Whereas that expectation doesn't exist from a man, right? It's expected that if a man is in a leadership position, that he commands the room in a way that a man does. So this walking on the tightrope can create a lot of internal struggle for any person, right? Because you're trying to balance a lot of opposite characteristics, a lot of opposite attitudes while trying to do your job. Tug of war. Tug of war essentially about when women go through discrimination, right, or maybe unhealthy environment because of the gender that they are early on in their careers. They also pass it on to the younger generation, right? I suffered and so should you, right? So there is also a lack of solidarity, there is a lack of compassion, there is lack of understanding as well, right? That's what tug of war means. It's more generational in nature, right? So you would want to look to your seniors as pillars of support, but your seniors may end up putting the same amount of load, putting the same amount of creating the same kind of environment that they had to go through, right? For a lot of reasons. One of the reasons could be that, oh, it made me stronger, quote unquote, right? And if you go through this, then this would also make you stronger. Something else could also be, why should I be the only one who is suffering, right? For some people, it can be, it's the passage of, it's a rite of passage. That if you go through struggles, then only then, and if you survive it, only then are you deserving of this promotion, deserving of this project, so on and so forth. Right? So what is missing here is that kindness. And of course, the maternal wall. I think this is something that has been talked about a lot, something that people are, speaking out about a lot. When women go through pregnancy and when they have their children, they're regarded as incompetent. Their dedication, loyalty, their passion is questioned a lot more, right? Even when women come back from their maternity leave and join the workforce back, they are looked at as maybe is this person going to commit to the same extent that she was before, right? Or is this person going to be able to deliver at the same level in terms of quantity, quality as before, right? Is having a child going to be a distraction for this person, right? Things that are not asked of or are looked at for a man. Any questions around any of this? I know there's a lot of theory that I'm talking about. So if anyone wants any more examples, please feel free to ask. Right? This is very close to my heart, microaggressions in the workplace, because microaggressions can be missed out on, right? They can be very subtle. So basically, they're actions and they can be statements, questions, assumptions, right? Towards the minority group, largely my marginalized group, right? And what happens is that it will increase in the long term, of course, it will increase rates of depression, create stress and trauma, right? Even impact your physical health to an extent. Why this happens is because there is an unconscious bias at play. With microaggressions, the intention of this person who is the perpetrator is not to be biased or prejudiced against this person, but they themselves don't understand, right, that they're doing any of this. I think that one of the examples, like one of the scenes in this latest movie, latest as in it's been a year, Ranveer Singh Alia Bhatt movie that became hit, Rocky or Rani, right? I think that whole monologue that he has, Ranveer Singh's character has, about how he didn't even know that if I drink tea, and I'll become black, like my skin tone will change, and that's offensive. He didn't even have that understanding, right? He didn't have that schema in place, right? What that does is that if he's going in with that assumption, right? That is what microaggressions can look like, right? You may or may not be aware of the impact that it's having on the other person. So microaggressions can be very subtle, they can be easily missed out on, right? Here are some of the examples. I hope this is visible. I know the font is very low. I'm going to read some of the statements that they have, right? One of the statement is she talks a lot, right? Or can I speak to the manager, right? Where especially if it's a woman who is maybe selling something in a store, and you say to her that should I speak? Can I speak to a manager? Not knowing that she might be the manager as well, right? Because we associate the job of a manager with a male. The activity would be more suitable for a man and not a woman. I think you're overreacting, right? I think you're being more sensitive, or maybe something that you should be more ladylike. You should maybe smile more and not raise your voice. I think that's a very direct comment. Um, Something like, "Haven't you just had a child? How come you're back to work?" Um, yeah. So these are some of the microaggressions that are there. I think when I share the deck, you should be able to. Yes, are you on your PMS, right? Yes, that's very true. And we also use it, right? We also refer um, our emotions sometimes going beyond our threshold as, oh, maybe I'm being, right? And so it's not just what we do to others, but also how we think about our own selves, right? Um, okay. So what do we do with all of this, right? All of this impacts your gender pay, right? And I think that's very obvious. There is a huge gender pay gap. I think the latest study, or I think according to the latest statistics, if my memory serves me right, the gender pay gap increased uh, in pandemic, right? We had come down to 28% gap in 2018 and in 2018, 2019, and with the pandemic, again increased by 7%. So yeah, pandemic has not done well. And one of the reasons it has not done well is also it has not done well for women. Is one of the reasons being that, when you think about the job market, and if it's short on supply, the assumption or the understanding is that limited jobs should be first given to men, right? That as if they have some first right over jobs. And that has what has impacted the job market as well, right? Pandemic was hugely discriminatory to women, especially mothers, especially housewives, especially women who are managing household and managing work, right? We all know we've all been through it, where professional and personal boundaries were lost, right? And women had a particularly hard time trying to manage everything on their own, while a man in most households only had to take care of his work, and hence men could also put in more hours of work as compared to women, because they were not looking after a household, they were not cooking, they were not cleaning, they were not looking after their children and their homework and their studies, right? So that also is also going to show up when we talk about gender pay gap. Just going to look at the. Okay, so someone is asking if microaggressions are usually by women towards other women. It can be by anyone, women towards women, men towards women, and of course also from women to men and other marginalized communities, right? But because we are talking about women at workplace, my examples were more focused on microaggressions that women go through, right? But microaggressions are not just about gender, they're about any kind of stereotypes, biases that may come up, right? They also show up a lot in when we talk about caste, religion, when we talk about LGBTQI community, right? That's with regards to any group. Differences in accommodation, right? Think about it. When a woman goes on maternity leave and when she has to come back, um, sometimes the options given to her are, do you want to go part-time, right? Or do you want to move to this role where it's less demanding, where it's, going to be lot less working hours, or, all of these things. Women are expected to make accommodations, right? Whereas men are not expected to make accommodations. Even after they have children, even after maybe they have gone through a life transition, and this will impact opportunities, right? It's also assumed that women can make these accommodations because, hey, they're not the breadwinner. Hey, because she already has a father, husband, brother who's taking care of the family, right? So accommodations are almost expected from a woman. And if you look at it, right, historically, as growing up as a child, you're always told to adjust. You're always told to compromise, to sort of, it's okay, it's fine, right? That's the message that we are giving our girls. So even at workplace, it's also difficult for women to say no to these accommodations, because you're also conditioned from a very early age to be the one who is adjusting, who is compromising, who is doing all of that. Someone spoke about the glass ceiling, right? This invisible barrier beyond which it feels like you cannot rise above, right? And that is also what stops women from workplaces coming up with policies, processes, and even systems as a society that also take women into consideration. In one of my informal conversations with one of my very close friends who's also in the field, and she works more with the social sector, she used to say that, this world is made by average people for average people. Just like that, this world is made for men by men, right? And anyone who doesn't identify as a male is going to have problems to adjust, because we are fitting ourselves in the society that's created by them, right? And this also means that we are not creating a society that can be inclusive anymore, right? So people, if we don't have women at the top, we won't be able to create a workplace that is inclusive of women, that is inclusive of other minorities. The glass cliff is a very closely related concept where, if women are promoted to higher positions, especially when it's crisis, right, or especially when it is known, or there is a hunch or an assumption or a hypothesis that they are going to likely to fail at their job, right? Because of course we would want someone to take the blame, and this is what literature says. This is what case studies have also observed. So what are the actionable steps? I've talked a lot about problems, and I've talked a lot about what's happening. What are some of the actionable steps that we can take, right, actively? And let me also maybe give this disclaimer to begin with, right? That of course a lot will depend on the glass cliff is basically when women are promoted to a level, like, when they are promoted to a leadership role, especially when it's crisis situation and it is known, or there is likely probability of her failing at her job, right? It's basically more of scapegoating. Okay, coming back to actionable steps, what I was saying is that the disclaimer I wanted to give is, of course, these are steps that an organization needs to take at a systemic level, right? But we also need to find, or we also need to think about what it means at an individual level for me to be able to do, for me to be able to ensure that women around me are safe, right? We talk a lot about psychological safety when we talk about safe workplaces, or when we talk about safe spaces. Psychological safety essentially means there is no interpersonal fear in that setting, right? So, for example, my manager can create a psychologically safe space for me by ensuring that I'm not reprimanded, I am not screamed at, I'm not yelled at, or I don't have to face negative consequences for maybe criticizing her or criticizing how the work has happened or the organization, or for me to bring up um, topics or for me to bring up conversations that are in disagreement with her, right? And they don't necessarily have to be about how I'm feeling, right? They can also be about, hey, the way that you asked me to do my work didn't make sense, so I have done it differently, right? Do I have that space to disagree with my manager, with my peers, with my colleagues, with my juniors without me fearing the consequences, right? So that is essentially what psychological safety is in any given situation. And it's very important for psychological safety to happen because if it's a psychologically unsafe space, right? If I'm going to be more worried about what my organization is going to say to me rather than worrying about my clients, right? I will not be able to be honest. I will not be able to be vulnerable. I will not be able to trust the people, which means I'm not talking about what's bothering me. I'm also not going to put in my 100%. I'm not going to feel that loyalty towards my people, towards my organization. And all of this is going to impact my productivity, right? One of the reasons why we are having this conversation is by not having women at workplace and their safety and security being taken care of is at a physical level, psychological level, emotional level, is costing us money at the end of it, right? That's the business case for why we need to invest in women at workplace, right? Half of our population is women, right? Almost half of our population is women. I should correct myself. And as especially in India, we are a very young workforce, right? So you will see a lot more women at workplace. And if you're not ensuring their safety, then it's going to cost us money. It's going to also lead to a lot of brain drain, essentially meaning that people are going to migrate to countries, to societies where they feel safe, right? So, okay, what are some of the steps that we take to ensure psychological safety? Creating safe circles, right? It can be peer support group, it can be just buddy systems, it can be having a group of friends, colleagues to depend on where I can speak my mind without without me knowing that without me having to go through the negative consequences, right? I should not be uh, punished for saying that my organization need to get these things in place, or that my manager needs to improve on these things, or this particular person has to work on this, right? Or I didn't like this, I didn't appreciate this, right? So there has to be safe circles, and safe circles can be formal, they can be informal, they can be lunch table conversations, or they can be also or they can also be formal, structured group conversation, group discussions uh, that are facilitated by maybe a counselor, maybe a mental health professional, maybe an HR person, right? But the point of also having these safe circles is that you know that things are going to be confidential, things are going to be private, that it's not going to be used against me in my appraisal or my performance feedback, right? Or in my promotion conversation. So that's also a part of creating safe circles. Empowering employees, right? Empowering employees by giving them resources, right? I need to be able to provide them multiple resources. And I'm going to talk from a mental health perspective because that's my field. Maybe resources in terms of having access to counselors, having access to psychiatrists, having access to mental health benefits, right? A lot of organizations today also give leaves, right? Mental health leaves. And it what it does is that it enables me to also take control of my own situation, right? It enables me to make a choice to say that this is what I need today. I don't need to go and see a therapist. I just need a leave where I can work on my emotions, where I can work on what's happening. So that's how you empower people, by giving them alternatives, by giving them resources. external, and that's how they will also build internal resources. Building a comprehensive system, what this essentially means is that you're talking not just about mental well-being, right? But you're also trying to be more holistic and also talk about physical well-being. You're trying to address a lot of aspects of wellness and not just focus on um, doing retreats or not just focus on giving yoga classes vouchers, right? But that you're building a system that if this is what you need, then this is where you go. All of this can be a part of resource building. Adopting a personalized approach, I think it's very similar to the earlier 2 points that I was trying to make, that not everyone will need a therapy session. Not everyone needs medications, right? And not every situation needs a therapy session or medication, or not every situation needs a mental health leave, right? So how do I ensure and how do I uh, how do I how do I create a system where it can be adopted to what my struggle is, to what the problem that I'm facing, right? Promoting open communication, open, transparent communication. That's also kind in nature. That's also compassionate towards everyone, not just women, right? But creating psychological safety is just not on women or men. It's on everyone involved, right? Encouraging work-life balance. I think this is pretty obvious, pretty clear. Addressing workplace stressors. I think this is very important. We need to know what's causing stress for us to address it, for us to work on it, right? Is it overworking? Is it feeling overburdened? Is it deadlines? Is it not having a good management around, right? Is it inflexible policies, right? So what is it that is causing stress? And for that, you need to ask your employees, hey, what's happening here, right? What are their concerns, right? What are the barriers that they are facing? And you won't be able to know it if you're not open to feedback. One of the things that psychological safety promotes is asking for feedback, right? Is working on feedback. One of the most important things is supporting transitioning employees, and transitions happen for both men and women, but the needs are different. Women have different needs and men have different needs. So going back to that, personalized approach, are we able to adapt our policies to what a person needs, depending on their situation, depending on their circumstance, depending on their, say, financial situation, their gender, their life situation, right? For example, very obvious example, women coming back from maternity leave or women going on maternity leave. But transitions can also be promotions, right? Even though it's a good change, it's still a change, and any change can cause stress. Transition can also be relocating to a different city, right? Getting a internal transfer, getting a lateral transfer, right? So transitions are will cause stress inevitably to some extent and degree. And then how do we support it, right? We can have uh, conversations around it, right? But are we also able to build systems in terms of, if this is the problem, then this is where you go to solve that problem, right? Are we employing different departments to solve for that problem, right? Is something that we need to look at depending on the kind of workplace we are at. And of course, addressing stigma. I think there's also self stigma sometimes, and there is other stigma. Other stigma is basically people judging me for my mental health issues or my issues in general. And stigma at my end also, right? That how can I have these thoughts, or how can I have these emotions, right? So addressing that self stigma and other stigma become very important. Just looking at the chat box. Okay, there's a huge question there. Maybe I'll come to it in a bit, yeah, or a comment, but I'm going to get to it in a minute. I think, yeah, what I was trying to say is investing in women at workplace and why and how we do that. Right? Firstly, building awareness. Right? If you don't know that a particular group is going through these concerns, then how do we start to address these concerns? I don't know how many of you have seen here this movie called Hidden Figures, right? And there's a very powerful scene where the protagonist, she has to run across the campus to access bathroom, right, to access washroom. And the men in that building are not even aware that there's no toilet for women, and she's the only woman working on that floor, right? And unless and until she has the scene where she's shouting about it, she's having a breakdown about it, and that's when the boss, her boss, sort of takes action, right? So building that awareness, right? And we don't always have to go through such dramatic situations, but we need to know what we are facing. We need to have a needs analysis done to understand where the problems are, where the gaps are, right? It may not be problems always, but it just may be gaps, right? And then ensuring that we are doing sensitization training, right? Where we are teaching people how to maybe talk to women, how to talk to a certain group of people. And there should be no shame associated with not knowing something, right? Like I said, all of these biases, prejudices are ingrained in us, right? We have grown up with these conditioning, with this kind of environment. So it's perfectly okay to not know or to not be aware. But the idea is to move up, right? And that's why training programs become important. Having oh, which movie? Hidden Figures, if I remember it right. Yeah. Strict posh policies, I think this goes without saying, any kind of violence, any kind of violation, right, of my person cannot be tolerated and should not be tolerated. Whether it be a man or a woman, it should not be tolerated, right? If you cannot physically feel safe, you will not be able to survive in that kind of environment, right? You will not be able to work. Forget about thriving and growing and everything. On the hierarchy of our needs, safety is one of the primary needs that we have, and women know this better, of the kind of jugaad we do to keep ourselves safe, right, from stepping into an auto to stepping into lifts to stepping into a party to coming back home. All of this women are aware of, right? And women need to talk about this to their men in their life, and men need to be able to create spaces and ask questions and not assume that just because they can take a midnight stroll, a woman can take a midnight stroll. Adequate health and sanitation facilities. Why this is a separate point, I want to just focus on this for a minute, is because it gives dignity, right? And it leads to feeling of respect. If I don't have proper um, health facilities and very basic facilities like a bathroom, washroom to go to, then it means that it's just not my physical body that's being impacted, but it also goes on to show that how little this particular system thinks of me, right? I remember, so I trek a lot, and I remember I had gone on this trek in Maharashtra. I'm from Pune, I trek a lot. It was an overnight trek. Right? So we climbed the hill, and then we had to stay there. Mountain, not a hill. And then we had to stay there overnight, and then the next day we were going to come back. When we woke up the next day, and of course I wanted to go and relieve myself, there were no toilets there, right? There is no facility for a woman, and there's a temple there. There were people sitting outside, and we ended up asking them, hey, like, where do you go? And then they just pointed to the field, which is fair. But then that also means that now I have to take care of my safety, which means I have to ask someone to stand guard and ensure that I'm doing my business in as much privacy as I can afford, right? And this is just me doing it for a day. There are women who climb up and down every single day, right? So those women are not thought of, they're not considered, right? And this is a mountain. When I went to Northeast for some of my work, in a office, in a government office, this is the condition, right? There are no toilets for women, which is such a basic thing. And the understanding is that because we don't have women employees, we don't have washrooms for women, right? But that's how little women are thought of, or it is thought, it's almost as an afterthought, right? This can if I have to do this on a daily basis, right, then it's going to impact my dignity. It's going to impact my self-esteem, right? Because I'm not considered, I'm not in your thoughts. I'm an afterthought or I'm in no thought at all, right? So which is why sanitation facilities are so important here. Supporting pregnancy and new mothers, their needs are different, right? They may need more flexible working hours. They may need work from home. They may need rooms where they can breastfeed, where they can express milk, right? They may need to maybe step out more than usual, at least for some time, for some months, right? So are we understanding about these concerns, about these gaps, and what are we doing to ensure that that gap is fulfilled? So new mothers, pregnant mothers, expectant mothers will have different requirements. And there may not be systems to support them, but we can create systems, right? We can ask and we can inquire and we can take into consideration what they need. Because promoting mental wellness is absolutely necessary for everyone, but much more for women because for all the reasons that we've been talking about today. Ensuring equal pay for equal work, right? And I'm going to emphasize on that because in my own circles, I get a lot of flack for it. So ensuring equal pay for equal work, right? Not because you belong to a certain gender or not. And for opportunity, right? For equitable, there should be equitable opportunities without gender or any kind of label into consideration. All of this can only happen when we seek feedback, when we ask for feedback, and when we constantly keep reiterating our policies, when we constantly keep going back to our systems and checking, is there something missing? And there will always be something missing, right? You cannot cater to everyone at the same time, to the same level, especially when so much is changing around us. Hence, asking for feedback becomes very important. So maybe your Google Forms, anonymous surveys, pulse checks, all of these will play a major role in asking what do women want out of their workplace. Yeah, I'm going to quickly go through this one example, and maybe I'm going to pass it to Swapna because I'm very well aware of the time. So this is a case study example that we found, right? SAP is a very well-known company. It's based in Germany. So just want to also highlight that it's a developed country, so to say. And the number of women employees is around 33%, right? They did a they did a survey, they did an assessment to understand what the pay inequality was when it started its branch in US in 2016. And they found that the equal pay was at 99%, right? Which is good, which is amazing. But they wanted to address that 1% gap, right? And so over the last couple of years, they have tried to target, they have tried to target this pay disparity, and they have sort of achieved their goal in 2019. One of the things that they constantly keep doing to ensure that the pay gap is as minimal or as less as possible is training how managers have performance conversations, how managers have appraisal conversations, right? Having more sensitization programs in place, right? And again, right, this goes to say that we don't need to be fair and equal at all points in everything, but we can learn how to be that, right? Another quick example to run through is of the Swedbank. So I think they have more presence in Eastern Europe, I think in Latvia and countries around it. And their workforce is 61% women, right? And they wanted to eliminate gender pay gap by 2070, which they did, right? So they did train their managers in equal pay practices, in how you adjust salary reviews and everything. The point of these two examples is that these things can be done, but it needs intention. It needs active efforts, right? From people in the leadership positions, particularly. So the whole point of bringing these examples is that if you can do it at that level, then you can definitely do it. You can definitely do it in terms of Indian context as well, or at least try to reduce that pay gap, try to reduce workplace, more of a safe environment for women. Okay, I'm going to leave everyone with this question, right? What changes would you like to see for women in modern workplaces? Can be policies, principles, can be solutions, can be something as simple as I would like my organization to arrange a cap for me, especially during night shifts, and track it, right? Actively track it. Or it can be as as macro level as policy change. Okay, I'm going to get back to this slide, but before that, Swapna, do you want to quickly talk about what
Sure.
we do?
Right. Could you just help me unmute my video? I'm not able to unmute my video. The host has a power, so you have to give me the power.
Okay, host has the power. Okay, should I just make you the host?
No, then it's fine. Okay, I'll just present. No worries. Right. So thank you for this opportunity, everybody. The reason why we're just trying to give you a little glimpse of what all we could as an organization offer in terms of, services when it comes to mental health support or emotional well-being support. So we're an organization which caters to both B2C and B2B. And what we're trying to aim through this journey of ours is that give you a unified support when it comes to mental health support. And when it comes to organizations, what we could really do is, thank you, Mrinmay. So what we can really do is precisely give you a gamut of mental health support. And that service incorporates a lot of other features like where you have an access to therapy and psychiatric support through different channels. We have an application access that we offer you. There are a lot of group interventions being done to build an awareness about mental health. Precisely, along with that, we even do a survey in the organization. So it's a overall holistic package that we offer an organization when it comes to mental health support. And every element of this service can be fine customized based on the need of the organization. So the intention here is to introduce you to the plethora of services we can offer as an organization to an organization. Or if you feel as an individual that you need any kind of support, you're going through a low phase in life where you're not able to discuss your concerns, you can always, log on to our application, which is Amaha, or to our website, register yourself and use our services. And it is available for anyone. So you don't have to really, partner with us as a corporate, but you can come as an individual also, seek that support. And if any of your near ones, dear ones also need any kind of support, please suggest us. It'll be really helpful. And we make sure that, everyone who has concern towards mental illness or need that support, we are here to support you. And that's the only vision we are trying to portray through this slide. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Swapna, for it. I think Parimal has been talking about, when we move away from this idea of who gets the bigger share of the pie, we can start being more inclusive. And I couldn't agree more. I think he's, articulated thoughts very well. Brilliant. I think someone has also put it in under the Q&A about some study that they read about how additional struggles that women have to go through, especially when we talk about jobs that include a lot of travel, that include going to places, right? Discourages women from taking it on. Right? Yeah, and I don't know the solution to it, to be very honest. But what I do see is we have to speak up and we have to talk, and sometimes we have to, um, you know, talk a bit louder than everyone else in the room for people to hear what we are trying to say, for people to take note, take cognizance of what's happening. Um, and I think men need to maybe, just take a step back and also listen to what women are trying to say and not disregard their concerns or not disregard what they're bringing to the table. Right? Um, Someone has also said that one major step organizations can take is to provide good, nutritious, and safe food to all employees on board, right? So that they can cut down on enormous time required to pre-plan and prepare food. That's very true, and that's such a brilliant idea. I know a couple of people in Sweden, I think, yeah, or Norway, where they have this facility of food of lunch that is served to them, and it's good kind of lunch, right? There is that portionated protein and carb and everything. And it's across organizations, right? It's just not their organization. It's some government-run initiative where I think they can order lunch from these companies at a subsidized rate and distribute it to all their employees. Okay? So yeah, that's a amazing idea. Let's see if there are any takers for it. I remember when my mom was working, she had this canteen where they would have lunch, and they would have lunch at a subsidized rate, or it would get cut out of their salary at, like, monthly subscription or something. But that helped her so much, because then there was one person she had to cook less for, right? She just had to cook for her children and not for her own self, right? Which meant that she could sleep for 15 minutes more. So yeah, all of these are things that require thought, require initiative, require intention more than anything. Cool. Are there any questions, any comments, any experiences anyone wants to share? Otherwise, I think we'll stop talking here. Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you for all the thoughts